Welcome to the Explainer. Look, if you're running a small business, you already know that managing your capital is literally everything. Today, we're getting straight to the point. Numbers first, totally stripping away the hype and taking a hard look at your actual bottom line.
Because here's the thing, the salary is the smallest number on the page. Think about it. When you post a job listing and stamp a $60,000 salary on it, you probably think, okay, well that's my budget. But honestly, that number is an illusion. A base salary just does not equal the actual cost of a U.S. hire, not even close.
So let's break down the true U.S. cost stack. We really need to look at the actual financial reality of a standard $60,000 U.S. employee. We're going to build this cost stack up, piece by piece, so you can see exactly where all that money is actually going. That $60,000 base salary you just negotiated? Yeah, it only represents about 60 to 70% of your true bottom line expense. The data actually shows that the U.S. employer cost stack adds an automatic 40 to 50% markup right on top of that base salary. Let's dig into exactly what makes up that massive hidden slice.
Okay, let's see how this builds. First up, Layer 1, Employer Payroll Taxes. Literally the moment you hire someone, you're instantly inflating that $60,000 base by roughly 15%. You are on the hook for a 6.2% Social Security employer contribution, 1.45% for Medicare, a 0.6% federal unemployment tax, and then anywhere from 1 to 4% for state unemployment insurance, depending on where you're located. If you run a small business, well, you already know exactly how fast these mandatory percentages chew into your tight margins. That base salary is climbing rapidly.
Then we hit Layer 2, Benefits. This tacks on another 20 to 30%. Because, to stay competitive in the U.S. market, you absolutely have to offer a solid package. Health insurance alone is going to cost you between $6,000 and $12,000 a year per employee. Add in dental and vision. Factor in 10 to 15 days of paid time off, which is another 4 to 6% of their salary right there. And if you offer a 401k match, boom, that's another 3 to 5%. This stack is getting incredibly heavy.
And finally, Layer 3, Overhead Costs. Even if your team is totally remote, you're still paying for equipment and software, running you about $1,500 to $3,000 a year. If they're in a physical office, you're paying anywhere from $4,000 to $15,000 a year just for their seat. Oh, and we definitely can't forget the amortized cost of HR and recruiting. That's a $3,000 to $6,000 hit just to get them in the door. As a business owner, employee turnover is just an incredibly painful expense, right?
So, here is the absolute crucial point. When you apply that 40 to 50% markup from the source data to your so-called $60,000 employee, this is your true, fully loaded annual total. You're actually paying between $84,000 and $90,000 a year. That is the reality of the U.S. cost stack. It's not $60K, it's nearly $90K.
Okay, so now that we've established the true baseline of a U.S. hire, let's pivot and look at the offshore CSR reality. We're going to strip away all the outsourcing hype usually here and look strictly at the predictable financial model of an offshore hire, specifically a pre-vetted Filipino virtual assistant or customer service rep.
We're talking a flat monthly agency rate of $750 to $1,200 a month. That's it. That is the all-in cost for a pre-vetted, full-time, college-educated Filipino professional ready to jump in and integrate with your team. There's no hidden math here, just a highly predictable monthly expense. It's just such a stark contrast to that heavy, complex U.S. stack we just walked through.
And this flat rate, it's powerful precisely because of what it absorbs. The agency handles all the sourcing and vetting, they manage the HR compliance, and they even offer a replacement guarantee. But honestly, more importantly, legally speaking, you are leaving behind the massive liabilities of U.S. health insurance, U.S. payroll taxes, and U.S. office overhead. You're simply paying for the work being done, completely skipping all that bureaucratic bloat.
So let's do a side-by-side financial comparison. We're going to take that fully loaded U.S. number and stack it directly up against the offshore reality to really see the difference.
When we look at these fully loaded costs, your U.S. hire sits at an average of roughly $87,000 a year once you factor in those taxes, benefits, and overhead. On the flip side, your offshore CSR at that flat agency rate totals roughly $11,000 a year. The source data documents a consistent 70 to 80% savings on labor costs when comparing these apples-to-apples roles. It's pretty wild. But let's bring this down to a level you actually feel every single Friday when you run payroll, your weekly cash flow. The U.S. cost drains approximately $1,673 from your business every single week. The offshore CSR, that's about $211 a week. For a small business owner who's just trying to manage cash flow and scale up, the breathing room created right here is just massive. Which brings us to our final point. The gap is the argument. We've built the stack, we've compared the numbers side by side, and it all leads to this undeniable conclusion of our financial teardown.
Roughly $76,000. That is the exact annual dollar amount saved. That's the delta. And guys, this gap is the entire argument for making that first offshore hire. It really isn't about cutting corners. It's about reallocating your resources. What could you do with an extra $76,000 in capital? I mean, you could reinvest it in marketing. You could hire a senior US-based sales rep that directly drives new revenue. Or you could simply give your business a much wider margin of safety.
The numbers are crystal clear, but obviously every business is different. These savings hold up as long as you're hiring for the right role and actually accounting for your total employer cost. So I'll leave you with this final provocative thought to chew on. Are you paying for the work being done, or are you just paying for the geography where it happens? Book a call to see the math for your specific role. Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer, and I'll catch you next time.